hindi physical at mental na torture. Ang Russian roulette, ang pinakagrabing mental na torture na naranasan ko. Ipapakita sa akin ang isang bala na ipapasok sa caliber 38 revolver. Kaya ikutin ang cylinder nito, tapos itututok sa sentido at kakalabitin. Tatlong beses nila itong kinalabi.
Sampal dito, sampal. Pagka hindi ako sumasagot sa mga tanong. So, sumunod, pagka wala pa rin sagot, pinapatindi nila. So, ang ginawa nila sa akin ay inabuso nila ako. Sexual. So, sa definition ng Human Rights Reparation Act, ang rape.
Ang gusto natin sana, mag-usapan natin ng maayos, mahinahon, at yes, may magandang mga nagawa yung inisyatibo, ang administrasyong Marcos, kilalanin natin, di ba? Pero, huwag nating kakalimutan na may mga nangyaring masama sapagkat pag hindi natin naalala yon, uulitin natin yan. At anong klaseng values yung ituturo natin sa mga bata na sila na yung susunod na leader, pag yan ang tumatak sa isip nila, baka gawin din nila.
The late President Ferdinand Marcos imposed martial law or signed the martial law declaration 49 years ago today. But along with remembering this period in the country's history are efforts to fight the attempts to revise the truth about what really happened in 1972. How should Filipinos protect their history and learn the lessons of the dark days of martial law? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. And welcome to this Tuesday edition of The Chiefs. With us online are Lucio Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5, Robbie Alampay, who is just back in the country, I think reporting from some safe house. Hi, Robbie.
Safe ba talaga yan?
Safe to. This is an accredited quarantine hotel.
Okay, there you go. It's not a political safe house, it's a health safe house. There you go. And we'll be joined in a while by Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, of course. What are our big stories today? A big political story occurring, not occurring today, but occurring tomorrow, but was broken today.
Actually, it's not so much Isko declaring tomorrow. It's not
Isko
that.
Moreno.
It's the running mate that he chose. That's the story today.
Coming from left field, di ba? We're talking about Dr. Willie Ong.
Exactly.
Pero yun ang hirap sa atin Parang actually, sa Vice President, with all the parties right now, hindi mo talaga alam kung placeholder muna yung mga yan and so on because with the way it's being played, kaya yung talaga obviously, in all seriousness, obviously, it's Isko Moreno, not that people are surprised by that. Pero, as people declare, the game changes every single day.
Yes. At saka, I think because of the substitution that proved to be, sabihin na lang natin, very, very rewarding for then candidate Rodrigo Duterte, no? Parang ngayon, alam na natin na baka maging par for the course. Diba? Yung substitution playbook. Sabihin na lang natin, diba? Mukhang magiging...
So, it ain't over until the fat lady signs her COC.
Right.
And the deadline lapses for replacement.
The substitution.
Haba nung kanta, no? Mahaba na.
Yeah. Well, just a quick recap. See, Dr. Willie Ong had surprisingly good numbers in 2019 in the Senate run. He took in the number 18 slot, 1-8 in his first run for any political position.
Yes.
Without any experience in campaigning or whatever, and after only spending $500,000 pesos, and that's relatively cheap for any campaign.
Well, because he has 16 million followers on Facebook. I mean, diba? That's nothing to sneeze at. Talagang 16 million, diba? Sabihin na natin ang kalahati doon sabi na natin, di ba? Supportive. Malaki yun, ha? I mean, if you have
Yeah, that's already
63 million
eight.
voters and only so many of that will vote, no? Like, hindi naman lahat yun boboto. Malaking bagay yun kung ma-corner niya yung 8M.
Pero ika nga, sabi, not that we're discouraging anyone, ha? Parang we're wishing everybody well. Pero ika nga sabi ng mga political analysts, iba yung tumatakbo ka sa Senado where people get to fill in
That's
12
true.
names.
True.
Iba yung tatakbo ka sa presidente or vice president na isang pangalan lang ang pagpipilian.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Well, last interesting point, ang mga kabangga niya kung sakali will be President Duterte. Kung sakali na magkatuluyan sila.
Kung hindi...
Malaking kung. Malaking kung. Again, nothing is final until until November 15, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
So,
si Tito Sen. Lagyan na natin. Tito Sen. Siguradong tatakbo. Nag-declare na rin. But then again, nothing is sure na until it's sure. Okay.
The only thing sure is, of course, the past. In the past, on this particular day, we also look back at one particular president, of course, and the impact that he has had on our society that continues to linger. And yan yung isang segue mo, Ed.
Yeah. We will be discussing martial law. Of course, that's your reference. We'll be discussing martial law later. But for now, we begin with Undersecretary Nepomuceno Malaluan of the Department of Education to follow up on our discussion yesterday or last night dun sa face-to-face classes. Yusek Malaluan, thank you for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Yes.
Ayusek, good evening.
Yes.
Ayusek, good evening.
Sa mga
Hi, sir.
chiefs.
Yes, sir. Sir, ginas namin kagabi si Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Berjere at sabi rin niya,
Yes.
well, of course, up for approval pa yung mga guidelines for face-to-face classes and everybody really is looking forward to that. Now, we understand po, nagmi-meeting pa kayo with the DOH to finalize these guidelines. Pero baka you can give us a general idea of how it's emerging. What are we looking at na talagang nakapako na? Yung talagang sure na tayo.
Well, actually, it's almost complete. In fact, it's already signed off by the technical teams of both departments, and the request, because Department of Education is still the lead here, that it be signed by Secretary Briones, and it is in the desk of the secretary now for her final review. Once it is signed, we will transmit it to her counterpart in the Department of Health. So we are hoping that within the week, kung kaya, the guidelines will be out, and you will see all of the details in these guidelines.
Give us an idea of some of the details, if not all.
Yes. Well, first is, as you know, we went into a joint guidelines with the understanding that any return of face-to-face now is not just an education issue, but also a health issue. And that's why there is this joint guidelines. Now, within these guidelines, it covers both the learning part, how we blend the face-to-face classes with the learning, because that's the objective of this in the substance. But we also integrate here all the health and safety standards as indicated by the DOH. That covers what are the eligible schools, the teachers, the children or the students, what they call the administrative controls, the engineering controls, ventilation, physical distancing, the protective equipment that are needed, the contingency measures are all in these guidelines, and also the framework of shared responsibility, where the role of the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the local government units, and the parents are all in. In addition to that, there is an accompanying contingency manual that spells out the different scenarios that can happen in the course of the pilot study from the perspective of COVID. And all of those scenarios have very specific a protocol so that we know that the actions are guided by prior information and guidance by our health experts. So in gist, that's it, and
Yusek,
it will be released publicly for all to see.
Yusek, could you give us an idea? Sa obviously, napakarami nun, right? Even just on the health protocol side. But kahit top of mind lang, what are a couple of the biggest headaches on the health protocol? Ano yung pinakamahirap ma-hurdle sa health protocols? And for that matter, ano pinakamadali, if there's such a thing?
Well, it follows all the sequence of the framework of DOH: the prevention, detection, isolation, contact tracing, treatment, and reintegration. So all of those are there. You would think that prevention is easy because you have all of your hand washing, you do the testing for symptoms and so on. But you can see that that's where you can say that's where shit happens. I mean, for sorry for the language, but even in the experience of those that have done this in the U.S., for example, we've seen some of the cases where there is a teacher that thought that she just had an allergy but was already a COVID symptom and infected a number of learners. There are instances of a learner attending a birthday party and infected. So while we try to have very stringent protocols at the home during their travel from and to back to the home and in school, we know the nature of this invisible virus that before you know it, you have been exposed and you might be infected and you could be a transmitter of this. So it is a very, very delicate, going to be a very, very delicate exercise because one misstep can actually jeopardize the expansion of face-to-face classes. And we know that it is a very important component of learning. So we are treating this with utmost, in fact, extraordinary diligence and not just some
Yes,
form of...
but Yusek, to that point kasi, yun din yung, of course, ayaw nyo yun, ayaw ng kahit sino. We don't want, nobody wants a false start. Pero yung pong ano yung punto nyo, ano yung tolerance level natin, if that's a good way of calling it? Because something will happen. Diba?
Yes.
Magkakaroon what is our tolerance level before we actually say, teka muna, atras ulit tayo?
Well, the scenarios are there. For example, I'm looking at least 11 different scenarios, and it does not mean all it's about the learner being infected. It can be a household member of a learner or school personnel shows symptoms of COVID-19 but has not been tested. The learner or personnel is not showing symptoms of COVID-19. A household member of a learner or school personnel is a confirmed case of COVID. So all of those things are included. So it's not just about infection visiting a school, but even the immediate community, because that's part of the risk assessment. For example, there is a high resurgence of COVID in an adjacent barangay. The affected barangay is known to be frequented by members of the barangay where the school is located. So there, to the extent that we can foresee scenarios, we try to provide very specific measures guided by the medical experts so that we don't get caught in a panic when something happens and just do interventions that are done on the ground. As much as possible, we want it to be a combination of central guidance and, of course, a capacity of the field to make the certain adaptations as necessary. So, in other words, it's green territory for us, and we are appreciative that after we have submitted to the president the recommendation with the joint support on the guidelines by the Deputy DOH, and knowing also that it had the benefit of consultations with medical experts and seeing the details, he came around to allowing this, even at this point of when the
Delta
counterintuitively
variant, yeah.
when the Delta variant is here.
Yun
So
nga eh.
I,
Yeah, which brings me to asking you, just on a day-to-day, on ground zero level, no, how do you expect, say, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, yung kinder level children to observe physical distancing? I mean, how do you enforce something like that among children, unless you have like at least 3 teachers there, perhaps? I don't know, but have we
think,
thought about those little details? Yeah.
I think the assumptions are the children are as behaved as we were when we were young.
Not
patay tayo
sure.
dyan. Patay tayo dyan.
No, I'm just making like, because we've been talking about this for really endless time with our counterparts in DOH. But let me just point that we're talking here about teachers that have been dealing with children for their professional life. I mean, we've shown a capacity. I always make this just to relate some anecdotes of how we are able to adapt to certain situation. Our frontliners, our teachers, when the lockdown came in March of 2020, and they suspended all air travel, public transport, we had more than 6,000, or I mean, close to 6,000 students that were trapped in Tuguegarao and Isabela, and we were able to bring all of each one of them home, even in that situation. What we're saying is that we also have a level of trust to our frontliners and field units, being you know in the context of dealing with classroom situation, and now in a very controlled setting, because one, it is voluntary, and second, there are limits to a class size. It is not full scale. They will be there for only 3 hours for kindergarten and only 4 hours for the students. So there is no lunch going to happen there. Their entry to the school for the different classes are staggered so that they won't be in the entrance of the schools all at the same time. Most of them are walking to and from the classroom because of the nature of where the schools are. In fact, many of the students, as Senator Pia Cayetano is arguing, are also being seen outside in these low risk areas, being together. So in fact, we feel that we can even impose some heightening of the consciousness about the health standards with the involvement of the school. So there is hope and confidence in the guidelines that we have. You've listened to Undersecretary Vergerie also yesterday. I think she explained from a medical standpoint why kindergarten to grade 3, both in terms of the infection resilience, as well as the age group that most need the interaction with other students for the social emotional development. So all of that have been considered. In fact, we've been discussing this too long already, and we feel we believe we are ready. We were just in a meeting with the in the Execom. It's still ongoing, and Mancom, and there are some regional directors that are still asking if they can add. But the position of the secretary is let's stick with what we have. Let's try to ensure that there is no misstep that can jeopardize the expansion of face-to-face classes. By the way, just one point, how the Delta variant has altered the condition. In May, when the COVID situation is better than the present surge, of the 638 pre-evaluated schools, and we subject them to the health risk analysis, and we just pick those that fall under the minimal risk category. This is the lowest risk category, less than zero or zero growth in the last 2 weeks of cases,
Are
and
not-
the daily attack rate one
yes.
is less than one per every 100,000 population. Nung Mayo, ang umaabot dyan ay mahigit at any day of the 638, mga 150 schools of those that we have pre-evaluated, 160. But today, it's just 20 plus of those 638 that will fall under the minimal risk category. And I recall I asked our staff kung ano ang nabanggit ni Yusek Vergere dyan, na sabi nila they can evaluate at an even more granular level. But the Secretary has mentioned that in our meeting tomorrow with the Department of Health, her view is that kung talagang 27 lang ang magko-qualify dun sa minimal risk, why don't we just stick with that and not force to put up the 100? So that all of those will be decided tomorrow when we meet our DOH counterparts.
So kayo, sir, ang mamimili ng school. It's not like schools or
LGUs.
superintendents will apply. Hindi ganun yun.
Natapos na tayo dun sa stage na yon, Luchi. Kasi meron na
So
tayo,
meron ng listahan
meron
ng
tayong
mga schools.
readiness tool na where they made the self-assessment, they were validated. At yun yung pinagmula ng 638 public schools that we have. Na
Okay.
pre-evaluated, but on a daily basis, based on the DOH data, we check them for their COVID risk situation or classification, whether they will fall in minimal, but their readiness with respect to their capacity to implement the health standards have already been pre-evaluated. Ang wala pa is the slots that was open for 20 private schools. We will still undergo the selection for the additional 20 private schools.
Okay. So mag-ocular kayo, ganun. Is that how it works? You do the
Actually,
ocular to make sure that whatever they actually claimed as their readiness is indeed what it is. Tama ba yun?
I will more likely be visiting a few of these schools next week, but only in Luzon, because we're still not traveling inter-island right now within DepEd.
Yusek,
Sir,
of
what
course.
about
Go ahead, Bok.
Sige, go ahead. Well, sige. Sir, what about the vaccination rate of teachers? How many of them have been vaccinated? Because we've been talking about the possibility or the danger of infections, and you're going to have teachers going face-to-face with up to 16 kids at a time.
Yes.
So there's always that possibility. So paano po yun? What's the rate of vaccination for teachers right now?
Well, overall, our vaccination for teachers, the last time I checked, I don't have the latest figures, but we're hovering, I presume at this time, unless it's accelerated, it will be in the 30 plus level. But
Percent.
that is uneven, yes, for the entire teaching population. But that is uneven because we still follow, while we are all A4, the geographic prioritization of the national government. And as you know, NCR, Region 4A, Region 7, and probably Region 6. Those will be the ones with the higher proportion. But we have understanding with the Department of Health and the National Vaccination Operations Center that these pilot schools will be given priority and allocation. So in our revalidation of our school safety assessment tool, that includes the rate of vaccination in these schools, and whatever residual we will fill up, but we will prioritize both the teaching and non-teaching personnel that have been vaccinated in the pilot.
Yusek, we've been talking about, of course, yung health risks, and that will never go away. But I also wanted to focus on, after after going on 2 years na of distance learning, ano yung risks natin as a society and for this generation of young children if they continue distance learning? Is there any study or are there any basic understandings of the impact on these kids, especially yung mga bata, no? Mga kinder to grade 1, grade 2, developmentally, the longer that we do not allow them to have face-to-face, what price might we be paying over the long term?
We can only, we do not have the full evidence for that, but what we know, certainly from an education standpoint, not from an expert child development standpoint, because our teachers are trained to teach the students based on background knowledge on teaching and learning, but not necessarily the specialist of health development. So it will be a matter of study. But what everyone knows is that the social interaction of the students is very important in the social-emotional development of children. And that was what Yusek Vergere also mentioned yesterday, why the first key stage was preferred by the child development experts. But on learning itself, we know that there is a difference between the supervision of a teacher in a classroom setting where the intention of everyone is to study and learn. That need not be the intention of everyone in household setting, because it depends on what household you are in. So there are learning losses, as what has been said by those that have been pushing, like UNICEF, for us to reopen the schools and make safe face-to-face classes. But we also see a lot of learning gains, because Roby, one of the skills that is very much needed now in this time of information and knowledge accessibility, even before COVID, is to already increase the skills of learners for self-directed and independent learning. Because unlike before, when you need to go to the school to have the source of knowledge from the teacher, now you leave somebody or more tech savvy than probably not Ed, because Ed is a tech savvy person, but certainly less as untech savvy as me. They would have more access to knowledge information, and that's why it's that skill for self-learning and critical thinking and to differentiate the sources of information that is needed. And we have been compelled to do that, but you need to have the capacity for such access to have that. But if you are a disadvantaged household, then it's not probably the learning gains might be less for you, and that is where the equity issue come in. And so it will be a reckoning at some point, not yet today, where the cost of this pandemic would be. But how different is it from, let's say, the economy? It's all pretty much the same with respect to industries that in the path of this COVID-19 will still be reckoned, not today, but probably several years from now. So we also caution on an unresearched take of how this will impact several years from now. Those are all based on assumptions. For example, you lose how many trillions of pesos, etc. But that is based on certain assumptions on learning losses and so on. But as I mentioned, there are also learning gains that will come out of this process.
Yes, sir.
But
Sir, may balaw ng konti, sir. Total today is officially the anniversary of the Declaration of Martial Law, at least officially. But in the last 49 years, almost 5 decades, there have been so many alternative narratives that have gained ground about martial law. A lot of people don't seem to have any idea what martial law really was like, especially among the young, of course. But in fairness, hindi lang naman yung mga bata. I'm wondering lang po, kasi a lot of people have been saying na baka it's the educational system. Baka there's something that we have to
Curriculum.
fix about
Yeah.
the curriculum or the subjects or the way that the topic is being taught. Of course, you're talking about 5 decades. Not too late on you, pero do you see anything, and also the Secretary, do you see anything that needs to be addressed or needs to be corrected or needs to be amended in as far as how martial law or that part of our history has to be taught in our schools?
Alam mo, Ed, a confession to you, when you had your intro in the program, I had to text our Bureau of Curriculum Development because I thought, are we going to talk about face-to-face or about martial
About
law at
martial
the
law.
beginning? But yes, history is taught, and particularly it is taught, as I mentioned, more directly in Araling Panlipunan, but it is only at a certain stage of the curriculum that this is taught. And I think I just spoke this morning with some of leagues and cities and of municipalities. But what is very apparent and what has been shown to us by this present situation is that we need to think of a learning space that is not confined only to the formal and physical education spaces. In other words, you have to build habitats of supportive learning for our development of our children that is not confined to the classroom. And now at no time has this been emphasized as now when our school buildings and classrooms are empty. Where are they doing their learning? At home. If we can expand the learning spaces and precisely do a continuum of learning spaces, then perhaps the teaching of this should not be confined to Araling, but different areas of and places and time for learning, and it needs a community approach. Media is part of the learning habitat of our children, and we have to really look at this at the moment. I think the Department of Education and Formal Education cannot absorb all of the things that we want our children to know. We have to realize that we have to build a great, broader conception of learning spaces, both physical and virtual at this time. And it requires all of us as a community to contribute to that learning ecosystem. And we just
Really,
presented
yeah,
that.
but sir, okay, yeah, granted, and I agree with you that education should be holistic, no,
A bigger classroom,
and it
yes.
should be yes, exactly. But if we were just to well confine it first to the formal educational system, and in particular the curriculum, let me just ask because I haven't really seen any Araling Panlipunan textbook
Yeah.
lately because my kids they're also grown up already, but I just want to know, for example, is there a chapter or are there chapters there that
Yes.
actually deal with the martial law and the atrocities committed during that time?
Yes.
Meron ba nun? I mean, is this
Yeah.
something that our kids are really learning as part of their history?
Yeah, Luci, this is where anyway, it's just a few months now, and I will be uh, on my way out. And this is where I take the hat of, for example, the secretary has directed the formation of a education futures program, and we're also looking at the quality of education. And I have to agree with you. We are doing the curriculum review, but we're looking at it in terms of competencies. But the quality of learning resources is something that needs to be, evaluated. And I'm saying this without uh, without having discussed this with the secretary. But I'm saying this because I know that she would want the curriculum and learning resources to be faithful to history. But we have to evaluate all of our learning resources. That has been shown, for example, by lapses in the quality of learning resources, in the distance learning, the errors and things like that. And there are errors that are about something that you would not imagine would have been committed. And so there are weaknesses there, and I think it is not something that that I can speak about holistically in this conversation. I think it's something that needs to be looked into as we pivot to the challenge of quality in basic education. Learning resources, quality of learning resources is really uh, one of them. We're fixing the curriculum in terms of some of the problems that we've seen, like congestion of the curriculum. One of the findings is that our curriculum has even higher cognitive demand than some of our the more advanced countries. But both congestion and high cognitive demand, the result is our teachers are not even able to finish the curriculum within the appointed time. So we're fixing that, but one one fact, especially if you're looking at quality of education, manifests itself. And I think the quality of learning resources, from the point of view even of history, has to be looked into at the formal education level and complemented, as I mentioned, with the expansion of our idea of the learning space. That we cannot, there's this tendency that every new norm, every new skill, sometimes there will be a legislation, include that in the curriculum. How much can your basic education curriculum take? If we want environment, new problems, traffic, everyone has an advocacy to integrate in the curriculum. There's just limited time and space for you to accommodate all of these things that we want to teach our children, and then we blame
Okay.
the education system.
Okay. Education Undersecretary ng Pamusena Malaluan. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us at ingat po parati.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you very
you,
much.
Maraming salamat po. Maraming
Thank
salamat
you very
po.
much,
Sir.
Chiefs.
We'll just go into a break, so please stay with us. And welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. And now joining us is former Senator and martial law detainee Serge Osmeña III. Senator Osmeña, maraming salamat for joining us tonight at welcome po to the Chiefs.
And
Good
thank you for
evening,
having me.
Senator.
Magandang gabi po, Senator.
Good evening,
Magandang
Richie.
gabi po.
Good evening, Ed.
Well,
Good evening, Robbie.
Yes, sir. Sir, I suppose you caught the last part of our conversation with Yusek Malaluan. We were asking about the many alternate narratives that have been emerging over the last 50 years, but in particular over the last decade, about martial law and the Marcos era. And you were asking him about what could be the reasons for all these alternatives gaining ground, because they appear to have gained ground, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. If you don't mind, sir, we'd like to ask you from your point of view, po, as somebody who went through those dark days and survived it, what do you think? Where do you think we've dropped the ball? Why so many narratives that are coming out?
Well, because in our history books, and these are the history books that you see on grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, etc., there's hardly any mention of martial law. It seems that the Marcos people have quietly removed all references to martial law. And so there's hardly any bad reference or real reference to martial law. And that's not good because people will not be able to imagine what really happened during martial law.
How could that happen when the Marcoses have not really been well in power? Of course, there's one in the Senate, there's one in Congress, and so on and so forth.
No,
but
no, no.
it
You
hasn't
don't
been
have to
a
be.
Marcos.
You
Yeah,
don't have to
go
be
ahead.
in power. You just have
Mhm.
to have
So how do you change the
people.
textbooks?
You don't. You reach the textbook through the printer,
Mm.
not
Uh,
not through the not through the authorities, because the authorities are just too busy to read what's happening in the textbook. So
Yeah.
you go to the printer, and it's the printers who are at fault here. They totally whitewash everything, and it's hard because you don't notice these things. But when you take a look at the entire view of the grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7 history books, you'll see that they hardly mention martial law.
Mm.
So,
But it cannot be the. I mean, I know what you're saying, that's you can essentially circumvent the authorities. But I guess one question is, who among the authorities is accountable for watching over, in this case, the printers?
no one is really accountable for that because it's not an important part of our curriculum. See, so it is just a peripheral issue. So no one's concentrating on that. They're concentrating on the issues that have to do with study, not issues that have to do with
Yeah.
history.
Well, if I heard Yusek Malaluan correctly, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said as much, no, in so many words. He said that, ito yung dinig ko, Luchi, sa sinasabi ni Yusek, look, inaamin namin problema yan, pero napakaraming problema ng education system natin, even basic things in math, basic things in material, basic things in resources, we all have to address that first fundamentally. But I guess the question then is, then where do we intervene? Obviously, we agree with you, and Yusek Malaluan is important.
We have to address all these things. We don't address them one at a time. We have to address everything at the same time. And that's why you have many people in the Department of Education that do these things. So saying that, well, I still have to pay attention to this or to that, no, that's not an excuse because this thing has been going on for 30 years.
No, wait, but Senator,
Sir, is it
if
possible?
you will, no, you make it
Good.
sound like there's actually a direct intervention, an interference. There's actually
there is.
a deliberate effort
Of
to
course there is.
remove that part of our history from the textbooks. Are you saying that? So who's doing it then? Is it the Marcoses?
Of course there is. The Marcoses have been back here since 1992.
And you're
1992.
saying that they're the ones controlling
oh,
the
yeah.
printing and saying tanggalin nyo yung chapter na yan tungkol sa batas militar, etc. Ganon.
Yeah, because there are only very few chapters in there anyway. So they will just say, no, they will not just say, they will just get somebody to go in there and remove the chapter. That's all. It's very simple.
Yes, sir, won't that be noticed? Won't that be noticed
Yeah,
by
it will not
the book
be noticed
developers or the
because
authors?
when you have a book and it's just a simple grade 4 history book, there's so many things in that history book. You will not
Yes, sir.
notice it at all because it is only mentioned in periphery.
Yes,
You
sir.
see?
But sir,
It's not a main
don't get us
topic.
wrong, sir. We agree with you on the need for a full writing of history, for a full narrative of correct history. I'm just wondering, sir, is it possible? But is it possible that it's because of our a lot of Filipinos tend to think kindly of past presidents or people who have died already, and we tend to gloss over their sins or the sins of the past. Could it possibly be that na wag natin pag-usapan yan, wag natin let's not beat on the dead anymore, because that could also be a possibility.
No, but that is today. But that does not remove the fact that in the history books, they have been expunged already. So wala na yan sa memory ng tao.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Now, how do you reverse that? I mean, how do you compel the system to reverse itself on that point? And what will it take? I mean, I don't presume that legislation is always the
No.
the
You
here.
don't need legislation for this.
Hmm.
You just need somebody to go in there, like the Secretary of Education, for example, and just tell them, all right, you start referring to martial law in this chapter and this chapter. That's all. That's very simple.
Hmm.
That's very simple.
Ako rin,
So,
I mean, again, don't get me wrong, sir. Ako rin, takot din ako sa legislation. No? I mean, but doesn't that also politicize, I mean, that position, that power of assigning somebody, punta ka doon. Now I'm worried about, in the next administration, who is that person in the next administration, especially if it's going to be that simple?
well, it is that simple, unfortunately. It is that simple. So when you see this guy, Calypso Go, the fellow who's always been complaining about
Yes, sir.
Errors.
he is the one, for example, who could see that it has been done that way. And he is the one, perhaps, who can help correct it if they bring him into the loop. But they don't bring him into the loop. Now, the problem there is that in the printing of the materials for the Department of Education, it is cornered by about 70% by a certain group. Okay? And that certain group has been making tons of money. And that certain group will also not, shall we say,
Age.
he will not try to disappoint anybody, whether it's Marcos or Aquino or anybody. They'll always try to be neutral, but they always want to keep their monopoly of the printing. So if you can, if you could just look into that, you will see that that is the case.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, so all right, let's set that aside,
Yeah,
because
because
that's
I can see
something
where
that we will
I
have to
can see-
investigate. I guess, no, but yeah, yes, go ahead, sir.
I can see where you guys are coming from. You think that
okay.
somebody from outside or the Congress can say, okay, put this in there. You don't need to do that. This is already history. So you just put it in the history books. But if they're not in the history books, it means somebody removed it from the history books. So just make sure that somebody puts it back in the history books. It's as simple as that. Now, what's a history book? A history book, you only have one history book.
Yeah.
Grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7. So you just get those history books and include it in there. That's all.
Yeah,
You
but
don't
then it
need
would
to go
also
to Congress.
Yes, sir. But by going by that, it would also be that easy to undo it all over again.
Yes, it will be
Hindi po
easy
ba?
to do it. But still, even if you pass the law, it is, you can still undo it that way.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, what I do agree on is, I think, because where we all are, I think, is trying to look for some kind of an institutional intervention here. Now, one institutional thing that I think we can all agree on, and ilang beses na pinag-uusapan yan, is really the corruption in the textbooks and so on. And that's one question we've always asked. I mean, apart from just assigning the right person, which is obviously harder than it sounds, how do we once and for all take away this corruption in this monopolization of the production of the textbooks, which has also been discussed over decades, and I agree, must be somewhere at the root of why content also is unreliable?
Well, unfortunately, whoever's in power in the Department of Education is the one that collects the money. So you just look to whoever is in power in the Department of Education, because those are the ones that collect. Those are the ones that talagang binibigyan yan ng printer. Who else will you give to if you were the printer? You'll always give it to the Secretary of Education. So you look for those things. That's what you look for. you cannot say you cannot wait for somebody to come up to you and say, hey, there's something going on there. There's something going on there. We all knew that for a long time, but we could never get the Secretary of Education to say, hey, stop this already. No. So, tuloy ang ligaya. That is what's happening in many branches of government, branches of government, whether it's the customs or the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Public Works or Department of Transportation. It's all the same thing. You always have somebody there who's got a monopoly on something, and they will do everything to protect it.
Okay, well, let's move on to the elections and what you're seeing now. Where are you in this whole, political season called elections? Are you going to run, or are you going to be supporting anybody in particular?
Or competing against anybody?
Yes.
Yes. Well, no, I will not be running anymore. I'm too old for that, but I will be helping somebody. And I think that somebody will probably be Isko Moreno.
Okay. What do you feel? How do you feel about the Marcoses right now coming into actually into a very active role once again in
With good
governance?
numbers.
No. Yes. And the chances of a Bongbong Marcos actually clinching the top post is nothing to sneeze at, let's just say.
Yeah, well, he has a chance for getting the top post. He'll run for the presidency under with the vice president, who is Duterte. But I doubt if that will happen because Duterte will not be able to trust Marcos. So pag presidente na si Marcos, wala na si Duterte, even if he were the vice president. So I think that what will happen is that Duterte will slide down and make Sara run for the presidency. And if anything, Bongbong Marcos will run for vice president. But I don't think Bongbong can run for president because...
why not?
Because he would be fighting Sara.
Yeah.
And that would be
so you really do see a Duterte tandem.
No, I don't see a Duterte tandem. That is a losing tandem. Nobody will vote for a Duterte.
Why not? Because they're both from Mindanao.
No.
And there will be no base or what?
It's the principle
even
of it.
With the vote from Mindanao, they will not vote Duterte. Let's see. Sara got about 15% of her votes from Mindanao. 15%. The other 10% came from Luzon and the Visayas. So 15. So malaki ang lamang ni Sara sa Mindanao. It's 60%. She has 60% of the Mindanao vote, and she has about 20% of the Visayas vote and 20% of the Luzon vote.
Okay.
So if you have a Duterte ticket, I don't think that will hold any longer.
It'll divide it.
Because yes, the Marcos votes will be lost because Marcos will be running himself. So the Marcos vote is going to be lost. And if the Marcos votes are lost, that lessens Sara's chances. Now, Sara has about 60% of Mindanao votes, so that's about maximum. Okay, so she has to get votes from Luzon and the Visayas. So that's the way I see that. Now, I think that Bongbong could run as the vice president of Sara Duterte. And that would be a formidable ticket.
What about Willie Ong? What do you think are his chances as a vice president for Isko?
Willie is a good guy, okay? And he is a guy who has the ability to get people to your side, not by appealing to your political sense, but by appealing to your humanity. And so he would be a good teammate for Isko because he's not controversial. Bongbong Marcos is controversial, so let him run for vice president. There's going to be a lot of controversy around him. Willie is not controversial at all.
So, but you don't think he's just a placeholder there? You
No.
don't think that this is just a placeholder, pending possible coalition building on the side of the opposition?
It could be. It could be because we still have until November 10 to decide.
Right, for the
That's,
substitution.
October 1 to 8 for the official filing, and then the substitution. And it's the substitution that's important now. But the substitution will take place before November 10, I think.
Yeah.
Sir, we have a phone-in question from our friends at Philippine Star, si Suerte Felipe. Pinapatanong po niya, why are you supporting daw Isko? Can you elaborate? Salamat daw po.
Well, you see, Isko's got a personality that is like, it's very similar to Digong Duterte, but he is really from the poor. He's not a rich poor man like Digong. Digong came from middle class and upper middle class family in Davao. Although he pretends to be poor, he's not poor. Isko was really poor, but Isko made himself. He went to school. He went to different institutions in the United States to study further, and he has made something of himself. So he's going to be a pretty good, candidate.
Okay,
As a matter of fact, I think.
Last na lang, what about Lenny? Are you
Yes,
now
exactly.
saying that VP Lenny is out of the game?
I'm saying that Lenny is too low in the surveys. That's all. If she rises in the surveys, it'll be my pleasure to support her. But she's too low. Right now, I have to support only the one guy who can defeat Sara. One guy. You see, if I go for Ping, Ping's about 4%. I mean, anong gagawa sa pupulutan kami sa kangkungan yan.
How long?
Gordon.
What is? Well, how long or what is?
Pacquiao. So you're only left with Isko and Lenny. Lenny is only at 6% now.
Yeah,
But you're only left with Isko and Sara. And so I'd rather go for Isko than for Sara.
About Senator, pasensya na po, we're running out of time. But how long?
I don't know. I cannot hear you.
How long? Oh, sorry.
I can't hear
Can you
you.
hear me now? Can you hear me? How long?
Senator?
No.
No.
Senator?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Sir, can you hear me? If you can hear me, I'll relay it to you from the lobby. Sir, can you hear any of us?
Senator Serge?
I don't think he can hear us anymore. Sir, can you hear any of us, sir?
Sir, baka yung volume nyo na turn
Na-mute?
off nyo. Yeah.
Sir, can you hear any of us, sir?
Sayang.
Sayang, wala na. Tsaka wala na rin tayong oras.
Well, I'm afraid.
Sorry, sir. Yeah.
I'm afraid that's it.
Sorry about that.
We'd like to apologize to Senator Serge Osmeña. We're having some technical difficulties. It is an online interview. So, yun, we'll have to leave it at that. Sir, unless you can hear, sir, may pahabol pa. Baka may pahabol. Talagang ayaw. Hindi talaga pwede.
Going.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sir, maraming salamat po for joining us. I was Senator Serge Osmeña III, of course, a former senator and former detainee during the time of martial law. Maraming salamat to Senator Osmeña for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
That'll be all
sir.
for this. Thank you, sir. That'll be all for this Tuesday edition of The Chiefs. We hope what is discussed here will keep the conversation going. Remember, please, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.